Krishna, it's so great to be here with you. World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, 2026. So much is happening. I have to say this whole week, because we're basically at the end, everything is about AI and AI agents. And I know what you're doing with enterprise is going to change the world. But let's talk about your history. So over 20 years, you've been working with AI, even going back to creating Facebook, the Why Am I Seeing This, which everyone has seen. Tell me about your experience.
Absolutely, lovely to be here, Daniel, with you and in Davos, where everybody from world leaders to academia and industry folks talking about AI. My journey with AI started really in the classic machine learning days. And I used to be an early engineer at Bing Search, working on search quality, building models to improving search ranking results at Microsoft in the 2000s. And then after that, I worked in social media companies like Twitter, Pinterest, and Facebook, where we were building models for recommendations, essentially things like newsfeed at Facebook, where we would show recommendation of news stories or friend recommendations that users consume even today. And one of the challenges that we ran into at Facebook was, as the models became more and more complex, then it was really hard to understand why you're seeing a particular news story or an ad in your feed. And so that's where I got into the field of explainability of AI and decoding what's going on behind these models and why they might be predicting certain outcomes, why you're seeing a certain thing on your newsfeed. And that's where the whole, why am I seeing this, product feature came about. And that was really sort of the inception of Fiddler as a company. Essentially we felt like, AI was going to go mainstream back in the day, even with classical machine learning. And the trust layer, the aspect of being able to understand AI was important, and we wanted to build a company around that.
Well, everyone is talking about AI. You were the cool person before it was cool, and now everybody wants to be an expert or doing something with AI. So you mentioned trust, and I know you work with enterprises that are doing finance, health. I imagine those companies, I don't want to say 50% trust and 50% don't, might even be higher, that they don't trust it because I don't think they fully understand it. So what do you need to do in order for these companies to trust that Fiddler AI can do what they need to get done?
Absolutely. See, now the world is moving from models to agents, right? And people are building these compound AI systems where they're automating credit risk workflows, insurance claims processing workflows, clinical diagnosis workflows in these big companies. The problem here is that, unlike deterministic software, AI-based software, whether agents or models, are non-deterministic. For example, you may have seen it with yourselves. If you're playing with tools like ChatGPT, you may ask a question slightly differently. You may not be able to get the same answer. And then there's this aspect of models hallucinating, producing private information sometimes, or toxic information. So there are many risks that enterprises, especially high-stakes enterprises like financial services companies, banks, insurances, healthcare companies need to assess before they deploy AI to production. So where Fiddler comes in is we provide that trust layer so that you actually can minimize those risks while maximizing the ROI for AI. Because listen, everybody wants to implement AI. There's a huge amount of ROI. There's a huge amount of productivity unlock that you will get out of it. But you need to do it in a reliable and safe manner. And that's where the need for governance and observability and guardrails comes into picture. And so we are now building what we call that control plane for AI agents, where you have this one single pane of glass command center view in terms of what's going on with your agents, how they're behaving, what kind of answers are they producing or actions that they're taking behind the scenes. And that's what is important for these enterprise customers to safely adopt AI.
So let's say they trust you, they hear what you're saying, but they don't really understand what it can do for them.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are talking about AI agents, but they're not really explaining what does that even mean for my corporation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a simple example, right? So most customers today are implementing customer service agents. Customer service agent could take a question, it can go and retrieve information from knowledge databases and use these large language models to summarize this information for any questions that users ask, right? Now, it will help a human support person to reduce the time. It's a huge productivity unlock. Now, the problem is, how about if the customer service agent provides inaccurate answers. That's a huge breach of customer trust. If I'm responding to the user with an inaccurate answer, and I'm actually creating a huge amount of mistrust for my company, in the public. And now, so where Fiddler comes in is we can provide that real-time guardrail so that that agent that is actually producing that answer, we can quickly check, is this answer actually based on some grounding? Is it actually based on the source context that was retrieved? Is it actually leaking any company information to the end user? Is it actually susceptible for security attacks? So that you can actually ship this customer service agent in a reliable manner and maintain it, continuously monitor it, right? And so with that, you can now start using these things and essentially unlock that productivity. That's basically and that's just one example. Now you can think about coding agents, other workflow agents, help desks for different teams, legal teams, trading analysts. You have a plethora of different agents that this type of experience can help.
So what are you seeing when a company starts to implement this? What happens? Do they have productivity go up among their current employees? Are they making more revenue?
Yeah.
Are they acquiring? What are they doing now that they've unlocked this?
Absolutely. So there's this interesting phenomenon that happens in an enterprise, right? So there is a huge amount of pressure that the CIO or the head of AI is under from their board and the CEO to get started on AI. So there's the classic FOMO effect. But they know deep down that they have this fear of messing things up. We call it the FOMO effect, So they're
fear of messing things up.
Exactly. Okay. So they're sandwiched between the FOMO and FOMO, right? They want to get started on AI, but they know if AI goes wrong, even one incident could be like essentially could be a customer trust issue, could be a reputation damage for the company, could put the company in a regulatory scenario. And so therefore, where Fiddler actually we see a huge amount of ROI for our customers is we help unlock their first few agents. In many customers, we actually help unlock their first few agents to production. And then after that, we help them scale more agents to production. So the way we measure our success is, how effectively are we leveraging our customers to deploy more agents to production? How many agents are we able to monitor? What's the time to value in terms of insights? How quickly are they able to get to insights, to incidents with those agents, and how quickly are they able to resolve those issues? And those are the things that we measure in terms of our success, how we are providing enterprise value.
Seems like massive value. I mean, what corporation wouldn't want to implement this from any industry, right? Even small companies,
Absolutely.
Which I've heard a lot about marketing and sales and doing, smaller things like that. You have some big news. You have some big news that happened recently. Can you share what that news is?
Absolutely. So we just closed our CDC fundraise for Fiddler. It's a historical landmark for the company. We closed $30 million in funding. With this, we're able to scale the company even further and roll out Fiddler to many more customers, mid-market companies, enterprise customers that are looking for this. Right? Essentially, agentic observability and governance is not like a nice to have. Essentially, it's becoming a must-have in the quote-unquote the agent development lifecycle. It's a best practice. Even for smaller teams, you need to make sure that your agents are tested well, evaluated well before going to production, monitored continuously, and guardrailed and governed. And so that's the full loop that we are doing, and we are essentially positioning this as a control plane for AI so that you can see all of these things in one place, and you can actually create that feedback control for your agents running in production.
Well, congratulations on that. I mean, you have the money now, you're going to continue to grow, get more enterprise. What's 5 years from now? And the reason why I ask this too is I just heard someone talking about in a year, 2 years, there might be millions of agents floating around in the cloud or wherever, maybe even robots. I've seen a couple of robots today. I can't wait for that. You have AI agents in a robot. But is there going to be billions of agents? Like, how is the world going to be in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years?
I mean, in fact, at this conference the other day, one of the CEOs of a large company was claiming that they have 40,000 employees. Out of that, they plan to have 10,000 of them to be AI agents, right? So you see how company CEOs are planning for the future. So of course, there will be millions, if not billions, of agents running in the enterprise in the future. So the way we see it is, this is a big transformational shift that is happening. I've been part of, in the last 2 decades of my software engineering experience, I've been part of like the internet revolution, and after that the big data and the cloud revolution, where the software stack has changed. How do you create applications, deploy them, secure them, scale them, right? And in each of these waves, developers needed new set of tools to do that. How do you establish identity of apps, security of apps, observability, and scalability? Now we are firmly in this AI transformation era. So there's a new technology stack being built. How do you establish identity of agents, observability of agents, orchestration, scalability of agents? And we actually are seeing a great opportunity to become that default control plane and observability for agents that are being developed across the enterprise. And that's what excites me.
Do you think it's possible that somebody can create a business today and become a unicorn without any employees? Because I think this is always the thing, right? Like the solo founder unicorn or the one employee. Do you think it's possible that we will see this?
Look, I mean, we are seeing, we're seeing tremendous amount of productivity, right? So, the other day, Anthropic claimed that they were able to launch an entire product like, Claude Cowork within 10 days, right? Essentially, this is like,
Did they use AI to make it?
Well, absolutely. So they're using, that's what they claim, no? They said they're using Claude Code to sort of create these new products. So there is this sort of, compression of, software development lifecycle that's happening, where things are shifting from years to months to weeks to days to hours, right? So
to minutes.
Absolutely, and absolutely. So I think now what's actually, you don't need that many resources to create applications. You don't need that many resources to create and roll out agents. The work has shifted more around operationalizing them, managing them. How do you maintain them for the future? And I think that's where a lot of human effort goes into it, and our goal is to simplify that process, the operationalization, the ops of AI agents. How do you make sure that they're running properly? And yes, absolutely. And I think you'd see much smaller companies, especially in the application space, come up, and and you're already seeing this, that are growing very, very fast with very, very small teams.
Who manages does an agent, is it like a manager agent who then manages agents who manages agents? Is there like a hierarchy of agents?
Yeah, we use agents within Fiddler itself, right? So Fiddler itself is composed of agents. We have agents that judge other agentic outputs. For example, when we observe agents, we're looking at the traffic that we're collecting, the inputs and outputs, the tool calls that they're making, and we are observing it through our own models. We call them trust models, to identify hallucinatory behavior or incorrect tool calls. And so we are using AI to judge other AI. So that's basically kind of becoming the norm. Of course there is human in the loop. There's always this notion of creating golden data sets to create like human agents. There's always some human supervision required, especially in high stakes scenarios. But a lot of it is moving with AI being able to train to sort of judge and observe the other AI systems, and that's kind of the world that we are seeing.
Founder and CEO of Fiddler AI. It's really been great having you. And man, I'm excited for the future. In a year from now, you come back and I want to know how many agents are in the sphere. Because if it's a billion, it's going to be even more exciting.
Our marketing team does a good job. If you can go to our website, we actually are putting like a counter of how many agents are.
See?
That's what I've been waiting for. You see already a very large number of enterprise agents.
I like that. So everyone. So what's the website?
It's fiddler.ai. If you want to go and check us out. And if you're interested, feel free to reach out to us.
So fiddler.ai, then they can see how many agents there are.
Absolutely.
Incredible. Yeah. Thanks, Krishna.
Yeah. Thank you, Daniel.